Do you get really bored when you try to lift weights? This is something that actually we hear from a number of people. They're like, oh, I would lift weights, but gosh, this is just so boring. Well, good news, there are some things that you can do during your workouts to actually make it less boring for you, and it doesn't have anything to do with distracting yourself with music, with TV, or so many of the other things that we use to numb ourselves while we're exercising. This is what we will be discussing on today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast. We're going to cue the intro song, and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know that we recently released a book called The Exercise for Life Method. And if you enjoy the conversations that we have every single week on this podcast, then you are going to love this book. So to pick up a free copy of this book, all you have to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois. Now, at Muscle Activation Schaumburg, we believe your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. Now, when it comes to using exercise to build the health and function of your muscles, one thing that we recommend basically across the board to people is to be doing resistance training, lifting weights, okay? To be going into the gym or at home, doing something where you're really focused on strengthening the muscles and improving the function of your muscles. But the problem is that so many people find this to be extremely boring, so they tend to avoid it. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do you go about getting past that and actually getting to the benefits of lifting weights?
Charlie, you're right on. We think everyone should be resistance training. And in fact, I know that's not just limited to you and I, because literally 2 hours ago during a client session, we were talking about how the health field and the exercise field can be so overwhelming and confusing because there's, differing opinions and all that. But I didn't even say this. My client said this, that she said, I hear time and time again, there seems to be no conflicting information that everyone should be resistance training, especially people like me who are 55 and over, and also I'm a female, so I really need to be resistance training. And I just love that because, we have our particulars about how we think it should be done and the mindset people should have and all those great details. But the fact of the matter is that if you're not convinced that you should be resistance training, it's going to be really hard to resistance train because it's not going to be important to you. I did want to share that because good for us and our population that it's becoming kind of mainstream news that everyone should be resistance training, and there's really not a lot of conflicting information about if you should be resistance training or not. Everyone should be resistance training, but you actually have to do it.
Exactly. There's a lot of conflicting opinions about how to go about doing the resistance training, but you're right, Julie. I think across the board, the recommendation is, you need to be doing some kind of resistance exercise to strengthen your muscles, strengthen your bones, things like that, especially as people age. But, like we've heard time and again, it doesn't really matter whether or not you should be doing it. Knowing you should do it and actually doing it are two completely different things. And one of the biggest prohibitors that we find of people not doing it is, they'll use, I don't have equipment, and, they'll use that, I don't have gym access, and they'll use that reasoning. But really, they're just coming up with reasons because they don't actually enjoy doing it. They don't find it interesting. They find it really boring. So how do we get past that and get past the kind of emotional feeling of, oh my gosh, do I really need to spend the next 20 minutes, 30 minutes doing this thing that just seems to go by so slowly? Can't I just get to the muscle and joint and full body, benefits?
Exactly. Right. It's like, shouldn't it be that, like, people like Charlie and I, we work out and then you come in and we'll just swap blood and swap, joint health factors and things like that. Wouldn't that be like an amazing service? But no, you actually have to do the physical act of exercising. And I think it is so important to acknowledge that, hey, everyone is so different. So what makes you tick and what makes you actually follow through on certain actions is going to be different. So I think we'll cover a handful of things, and whatever works well for you, just do it. You just have to do it.
Give it a try and then keep pushing forward with it.
Yes. I wanted to share a little story. My first point, and the easiest one that we don't really have to dive into all that much, is you can always hire help. And I think hiring someone is a great way to just make sure it's done. It's like someone else is waiting for you. Someone else is going to create the activities for you or the exercises for you. I remember I had this client that hired me years ago, and forever and a day he said, yeah, I knew I needed to weight train, but I'm a guy, so I should know what to do when I go to the gym, but I didn't know what to do, and what was I going to do? Like, just go to the gym and walk around and look at the machines. He just felt really uncomfortable with that. So for years, he said, for years, I thought about doing this and I knew I needed to do it. I thought about walking into the gym. I didn't feel like that was the right move for me. And then should I just look at the signs on the machines? He just ended up hiring me as a trainer. And then ever since that time, he never missed a session twice a week for 4 years until he moved away again. So it was just really cool that that was the thing he needed. And so often we can overanalyze what exercise is. I might get bored when I do it. It's not interesting to me. But hiring help can be a really big hurdle for people. But also once you get over that hurdle, it's pretty smooth sailing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really big piece for a lot of people. It's just not only the accountability piece, but now all of a sudden it gives them somebody to connect with while they're doing the exercise and while they are having their workout. And that's a really big piece. So if you feel like that's, something that you need, then we definitely recommend, like, hey, go hire a personal trainer, find somebody who can not only guide you, but that you can have a connection with while you are doing your exercise. And that can be enough, like the example of Julie's client, to kind of get you over the hurdle and keep you coming back to it for, months and years to come. So that's a really big piece. One thing that I think works really well for a lot of people is usually people don't get too bored when they keep themselves moving. Okay. So think about like the last time you had to sit all day long and not do anything versus like you were moving all day long, right? And so there was always something to do on those days when you're just like going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Well, those days tend to go by really quickly as opposed to when you're just sitting and sitting and sitting. I mean, it seems like for me, like the longest days ever are the travel days, the days where it's just like, okay, sitting on the way to the airport, sitting on the shuttle to the airport, sitting at the airport, sitting on the air. It's like, oh my gosh. But the days where it's like at work and it's just like, one thing after the next, those days fly by. So the reason why I bring that up is because you can kind of take advantage of that same idea within your workouts. What does this look like? If you go from one exercise to the next, to the next, to the next, and keep going around, this does not mean, what I'm not saying is you go really fast or, you move really quickly while you're doing the exercise. You can still be slow, be controlled while you're doing the exercise, focus on squeezing your muscles, all the things that we talk about. But you can stack one exercise to the next, to the next, to the next. And guess what? Not only do you get your resistance training in, but you'll also get kind of a cardio type response, a little bit of an aerobic exercise type response. And it's a lot more difficult to be bored when you're also out of breath. Because now all of a sudden your mind's not thinking about like, oh my gosh, what am I doing next? Your mind's thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm getting really fatigued. Oh my gosh, this is way more difficult than I was expecting. Wow, this is this is really challenging. And so just that in itself, it takes it from just dull and mundane to, okay, yeah. Now it doesn't necessarily need to be like super interesting, but it's not boring anymore.
Charlie, I think you're right on with that. When you take your body from one state of, I think we kind of all walk around in some kind of state of rest. You're not huffing and puffing just walking in the door of a gym. And then you take your body to that state where you are breathing hard, or you're feeling your muscles burning. You've taken your body to the state of work. It's very difficult to not be present in that, to not feel that. And that is actually a really great way to stay engaged with your workout. And I love that you brought up that idea of going from one exercise to the next. We could say that's kind of like this idea of having a circuit. Mm-hmm. And a circuit not only is a really efficient way to work out, it's also a great way to just keep your workouts moving, where it's not like, okay, I do this and then there's a rest period. I do that and there's a rest period. Then I do that and then there's a rest period. It's like, wow, I just rested for 20 minutes and worked out for 10.
Right.
So anyways, I love that you brought that up. I think that can make people's workouts less boring because of the demand that it creates for the participant to be present. Mm-hmm. I think one way that I get really bored with my workouts is especially when I'm not being present. Like if there's a way for me to get distracted and think, well, if I just cut that last exercise out, I can get the laundry started. Mm-hmm. And that would be a much more efficient move for me. Is it really matter if I finish my crunches? Nah, I'll move on, and so there's that boredom, that happens with it. So I think creating that circuitry will really help you stay present. And not only that, Charlie, you brought up a great point where it physically takes your body into just a different physical state where you're working and it's hard to be not present in that. So it kind of like sucks you in a little bit to the workout.
For sure. To add to that, another thing that you can do with your workouts, and by the way, like all of these things, they're all very internal things, meaning we're not saying, okay, you need the rah-rah music or anything like that. Anybody can throw in some music, but like what can you do within your workouts that will still keep you safe, actually improve your results and help you come back to exercise day after day? So those are the things that we're talking about as far as like how to get past the boredom. So another thing that you could add in if you feel like you need some rest between sets is you could add in some kind of skill-based activity between your resistance training sets. Okay, so let's say you're doing a set of shoulder press, and instead of just kind of standing there and waiting for 60 seconds, you could do a shoulder press and then you could maybe do some like light footwork drills. Or even if you had, like an app on your phone where you had to solve some math equations or something like that, just something to kind of, all right, I do this and now I need to occupy my brain in a different way. And then, it's 60 seconds of that and then back to, doing the resistance training. It's something that you're adding in that maybe makes the resistance training a little bit more palatable. Like some people don't like drinking their coffee straight black, so they put some, cream and sugar in there to make it more palatable and they still get the coffee. Same idea with this. Like you're still getting the resistance training. You're doing something that's not going to hurt your health, that's not going to harm you, that's not going to distract you while you're doing the exercise, but it might make the workout itself more interesting.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Charlie, with adding in some extra activity between exercises that is specifically not going to be taking away from your workouts. I think sometimes we feel like, well, if I'm not doing strictly what's in the workout, then I don't know, is it going to be like as productive? But I find doing cardio drills between my weight training is a great way to also get in a little bit of cardio, kind of like how you were mentioning. Mm-hmm. So think about different ways that you could add in fillers between your exercises. If you're not doing a circuit, then adding in some different cardio activities. Or I did love that little math thing or I saw some guy at the gym when I first started working at a big box gym. He would do his crossword puzzles. And I thought, oh, That's so stupid. He's like, occupying the machine. And I thought, you know what? Both are really boosting their brain. And I bet he's the best at his crossword puzzles in his sets.
Exactly.
Because that's when your brain is the sharpest anyways.
Exactly. No, I was going to add that. I've seen people like do a Rubik's Cube. Like they'll blow a Rubik's Cube out of their pocket and they'll do their set. They'll set their weights down and then they'll start playing with the Rubik's Cube, try to do, solve as much of it as they can in the 30 seconds or 60 seconds and then go back to their set. And so it's just those little things like that, because so often what we see is people try to make it more interesting by making the exercise itself more complex and more circus-like in nature. It's like, okay, well, yeah, it's really boring to just stand and do bicep curls. So we're going to stand on one leg on a Bosu ball with using a band on one arm and, a dumbbell on the other arm. And we're going to have you whistling Yankee Doodle while you're doing it. And that in itself, that's going to be enough entertainment for today. And then you're like, okay, yeah, but what about next time? Because now that's kind of boring. It's like, if you just keep trying to make the exercise itself more interesting, you're completely diluting actually the effectiveness of the exercise then. So what things can you add in between the exercises that might entertain you a little bit more?
Charlie, that's such a good point too, because I think one thing that we've gotten to with fitness is that it's got to be really fun. It's got to be really fun. And, sometimes people are like, hey, I just started this new workout program. You should try it too. It's so fun. And then that's the pitch. It's so fun. And don't get me wrong, I don't need you to be bored out of your mind when you exercise. But the pitch about exercise should be what exercise is good at, which is improving your health and function, not necessarily fun. I mean, if fun and you enjoy it comes along with it, great, love that. It will help you return. But it shouldn't be that, come have fun with us and get fit.
Right,
it's
exactly.
Wait, fitness is then on the back burner instead of the front burner. So make sure that as you're adding in these ways to not get bored, that it helps you stay focused to the task at hand. And it's actually not promoting injury or making it so it's harder to return by, creating these circus-like actions that are, very prone to injury and high risk for falling and pulling things. And they're really a big distraction to what you're at the gym trying to do. Another way to combat some boredom is to do some of the actions that Charlie and I talk about on this podcast all the time, which is really tuning in to the workout. A lot of times we work out and we start taking our focus out, but really every workout should be a workout. Maybe we could recall it a work in. You're working on the insides, and there's different ways that you can work on the insides. And if you find that boring, I do have some suggestions on how to use them, but some of the tips that we've given almost on repeat in the past in different podcasts, because it is so potent, but is to do things like focus on the muscles and joints that you're trying to move. So instead of your bicep curls being a counting activity, make it an activity about feeling and engaging your biceps and feeling and engaging your joint motion. How are the joints feeling today? How is it feeling at the top or the bottom? Things like that. So focusing on how the muscles are feeling and the joints are feeling. In addition, focusing on making the contraction the leader of the exercise. These 3 things that I just brought up, you might in your head say, oh yeah, I do that already. But if you actually focus on doing them and improving them and getting better at doing these things, you will find it very difficult. And if that is kind of your jive, then great. Tune in really deep. Feel the muscles, feel the joints, notice your range of motion. Try to make your muscle be the thing that creates movement. A lot of times we move and then we feel the muscle sometime down the road. And instead, we're inviting you to do the opposite. So some ways that you can really play with this and make each workout differently. Let's say every Tuesday. It's great, I have biceps, shoulders, and abs today. Every
Beach
Tuesday.
day.
Every Tuesday. Oh yeah, beach day. I didn't even think of that. I was just thinking of random ones. Anyways, that's perfect. Biceps, shoulders, and abs today. And every Tuesday, I'm doing my same exercises. It's so boring. So what you could do is one Tuesday say, today I'm going to really notice my joints. Where does it feel good to start these exercises? And where does it feel good to end these exercises? And does it change over the range? If I manipulate different variables like my body position, does it change? Does it feel better if I stand like this or like that? That could be the focus of one of your workouts on a Tuesday, which is always biceps, shoulders, and abs. But the next Tuesday, which is going to be biceps, shoulders, and abs, you might decide today, instead of thinking of the joint stuff, I'm going to keep that in mind, but my main focus is going to be playing with making the contraction lead me into the motion and make the contraction the main leader. I'm going to play with that for my whole workout. And then the next Tuesday, it's still biceps, shoulders, and abs day. And that day, instead, you're focusing on feeling the muscle squeeze and seeing if you could make it feel more full or more complete or more dispersed throughout the muscle. So each of those ways you can work in to your workout and really protect your health, avoid injury, really enhance the potency of your exercise, but at the same time, really bringing a unique twist that will keep you interested in that workout, but also, again, keeping it really effective at promoting your health and function.
Julie, I really, really like that you brought this up and that we saved it for the end, because while all the other stuff was relatively superficial and I think easier to implement, this one is a little bit deeper. And do you remember when we had the subscription to the wine club?
Yes.
Yes. And, once a month or twice a month, they would do those wine tastings. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And we would go. And, weren't big wine drinkers, but we would sit there for the wine tasting. It was included in the membership, so why not? So we're sitting there, and the person who is pouring us the wines and describing them to us, and the people who are tasting it with us, they're like picking up on all these flavors. And it's like, oh, this tastes like that. And then there's this aftertaste, and this is a mouthfeel. And I'm thinking,
Charlie, it's called the nodes, chocolate nodes.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm thinking, you all are just making up words so you can sit around and drink. Like, there's no way that you are actually being able to taste different things and that you're actually noticing, oh, this feels different, on my cheeks or whatever. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm just sitting here drinking wine. You just have to be sitting there drinking wine. And then what happens is you sit there and drink wine long enough, not on that same day, but you go back after a number of months and you're like, oh, wait a second. Maybe that's what they were talking about with like that little bit of an aftertaste. I think I'm noticing it. It's not just like, oh, this is really dry or this is really sweet. Like, I can actually notice something a little bit different now. So what happens during that, right? What happens when you are able to start to pick up those subtleties? Your brain actually starts to change. It starts to allocate more resources to the things that you are telling it is important, meaning like you're telling your brain, hey, I want to be able to taste different stuff. Let me practice tasting different stuff. Okay, now after enough repetition, I'm able to taste different stuff. Here's where this comes into exercise. So often when people are new to exercise, they try working out and they're like, well, that was boring. That didn't feel good. It just felt like this kind of general sensation across my entire body. And then they get past that and they do it and they do it and they do it and they do it and they do it. And guess what? Their brain starts to change. And what just felt like just kind of general fatigue throughout their entire body, all of a sudden they're able to feel, oh, that's what it feels like when I'm squeezing my glutes. Oh, that's what it feels like when I'm squeezing my shoulders. Actually, I do feel all my abs. It's not just a one pack down there. I actually can feel all my different abs. And now all of a sudden, that game that they've been playing the entire time with resistance training and trying to feel different stuff, now all of a sudden they're like, oh, now I know what you're talking about. Now this is fun because now I'm able to experience different stuff. They're not sitting at the bar just drinking anymore thinking, why is everybody else saying there's so many different flavors? All I'm tasting is wine. They're saying, okay, yeah, no, I can feel all the different things now. So that's what happens when you exercise and when you do resistance training consistently. Your brain will actually start to change and you'll be able to start to notice all these different things that we talk about so often on this podcast, that if you are brand new to exercise or coming back to exercise after an extended period of time off, it likely feels like we are just making stuff up. Like we are completely making things up. But you have to stick with it. And that's when resistance training gets really fun, because now you get to experience your body in a completely new world.
I love the wine analogy, Charlie, because I think so many people can relate to that, because in my opinion, wine tasting is a very kind of skill. And yeah, so many times like, oh, did you taste, that strawberry in there? I was like, I wouldn't have said that was strawberry, but if you say it's strawberry, I'll try to taste strawberry. And then eventually...
It tasted like red to me.
It tasted like red? the genre of red wine? Yeah. And then you learn how to start tasting that. Just like with exercise, the more you practice, if all you ever do is practice exercise, the most you're going to feel is exercise. But if when you're drinking wine, you're saying, do I taste fruit today? Is that chocolatey? Is that cocoa in there? Oh, does it taste like, now I'm going to make some up, green grapes in there, red grapes? If you're wondering and you're staying curious and you're feeling for things and you're trying to taste for things, that's when you're going to develop it. So when you take your exercise and you go from, I'm here to exercise and I'm going to exercise, to, I wonder how my biceps feel today. Oh, that feels weird on my elbow. I wonder if I could change that so it feels better on my elbow. I wonder if I could feel that contraction differently on my bicep. It kind of feels different on the right and the left. Is there a way I could change it? And just like for tasting wine or tasting food or really any skill that you develop, the more that you practice, the better you will get at it. And I promise you, most of the time, your first handful of workouts of doing this, maybe even your first year of doing this, depending on how connected you are with your body, how much practice you've had in the past, you might not feel like you can manipulate anything. Meaning, I can feel something's there, which, by the way, if you can feel something, that's a big step.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to change it, but I can acknowledge it and feel that something feels different on that side, or my contraction feels better on this side and on that side, or, oh, my glutes, I feel like I can't contract them at all today. Just acknowledging that and being able to feel that is a huge first step. And then the next step is going to be, can I change that contraction? Can I use my speed or my range of motion to manipulate how I'm experiencing this workout? Then that is the kind of really cool, deep skill that that you can develop if you keep practicing. But you have to practice the skill.
So if you find that resistance training is really boring, but you know you need to be doing it, you're actually interested in doing it, you're just trying to get past the boredom of it, there are a number of things you can do. From, I'm going to call the most superficial of like hiring another human, a trained professional to be there to help guide you, to cue you through things, and to in part make the session more palatable for you and for your body and for your likes and dislikes, to structuring your workouts so it's more in a circuit type fashion, to adding in additional activities in between the exercises to keep your brain engaged, to ultimately really truly experiencing everything that your body can do and everything that your body can offer in these very specific exercise scenarios. Each of those can help make resistance training more interesting and far less boring and way more enjoyable for you. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is resistant to doing resistance training because they think it is boring as dirt? Share this episode with them so they can learn about different things that they can start adding in immediately to start to make their workouts more interesting. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So how'd you like that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed today, then you are going to love the Exercise for Life Method, which is a book that we just put out and you can get a free copy of by going to exerciseforlifemethod.com. All we ask is that you pay for shipping and handling, so head there now and get your free copy, as well as some exclusive bonuses that you will get instant access to when you get the book. You can learn more and get your copy at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Cates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.